And thank you, everybody, for joining today. Appreciate your time. There's really kind of three topical areas I wanted to cover today. Just very briefly, just to reiterate the problem that we're solving for at MedCrypt. Then I wanted to provide a quick overview of the MedCrypt platform, which is really made up of three key products. And then to share a little bit of a use case to make the products come together, hopefully make them come to life so that people can get a good understanding on how the products interact and what the benefits of those products might be. So, Mike alluded to the problem at the onset here of what we're solving for. And many of us at MedCrypt have come from medical device manufacturers or MDMs in previous roles. So we do understand the challenges that MDMs struggle with to provide the right level of cybersecurity on their medical devices due to either a lack of resources or tools or software or perhaps expertise or some combination thereof. And really, the mission that we have set out to accomplish is to help those MDMs build those medical devices that are secure by design by basically providing the right software tools, the right code, APIs, and expertise to those MDMs, such that we can make it as easy and as efficient as possible to implement the right security features into those medical devices, be they new devices or be they legacy devices that are already out into the field. We kind of joke around inside MedCrypt and say, what's the holy grail goal that we'd like to accomplish? And really, it's to be the API for the FDA or other regulatory bodies for those required proactive security features that are needed within medical devices. So that certainly would be our lofty goal, is to be that designated API that folks go to. So in essence, and Kate, if you could move to the next one, please. To be able to provide or easily add proactive security to medical devices, as an organization, we put ourselves in the shoes of MDMs or an MDM product development team when we're developing our own solutions. And we said, okay, there's a couple key things that we know or that we need. One, we know that we need to build reusable security tools that are also scalable. Secondly, we know that the solutions that we come up with need to work on everything from small embedded devices, such as an insulin pump, all the way up through to surgical robots and imaging systems. So a pretty wide swath of products. And then three, as Seth has talked to, as well as Mike, we saw that the regulatory environment was shifting, and it was trending toward that proactive security of baking in security or even going back and fixing products that are out into the marketplace. So pretty critical, elements to understand as we go through our development process. So when the FDA guidance came out in 2018 that Seth talked about, we were very delighted to see what some of those requirements are, because it aligned very specifically with some of the things that we do from a product development perspective and what our platform ultimately looks like. And Seth talked a little bit about what those key features are and the fact that medical devices, per the FDA, must be secure by design. So really, if we kind of dove into those must-have features of cryptography, behavior monitoring, and tracking vulnerabilities, from a cryptography perspective, the ability to encrypt and sign data and commands to verify the integrity of a device and the settings of that device, as well as ensuring privacy, is critical. Behavior monitoring will essentially being able to monitor devices to detect intrusions and or anomalies, and then be able to send alerts regarding those anomalies. And then finally, tracking vulnerabilities. In essence, and this is where MedISAO and MedCrypt have come together on generating SBOMS and tracking for new software vulnerabilities that impact software libraries on a medical device. So that's really been our key focus on those key areas that the FDA has come out and put out their documentation. And we're able to provide those solutions in a couple of different ways. Certainly on the front end, by giving our customers software libraries to use during the initial design and development phase, but also we have applications that can be used on the installed base of devices that are already out into the field, such that an application can be downloaded to implement some of the key cybersecurity features that we have brought to market. One other thing before I dive into the actual products themselves is we've done a lot of work in the last 12 to 18 months to take our platform and actually split it up a little bit as well, so that basically the products can be either used in a modular approach or in a platform approach. So if someone says, hey, we've got a cryptography solution, we're not in need of a complete platform, we are able to bring to market our solutions for a particular medical device manufacturer on a product by product basis. So let's go ahead and jump in, take a little bit deeper dive into the three products. And Kate, thank you. So first product that covers cryptography is a product that we call Guardian. And Guardian is our software library that makes it easy to build cryptography directly into a device, or to bake it directly into a device. So through a simple API call, it's relatively easy to encrypt and decrypt, as well as sign and verify both data at rest, as well as data in motion in the application layer, as well as in the transport layer with unique key pairs. Now, Guardian also contains our key provisioning and key management system, another product that we call Overwatch. But the platform is flexible enough that if an MDM has their own PKI tool, we can certainly integrate with that tool. So again, we've got a lot of flexibility in the way we bring the products to market and the way that we work with our particular MDM customers. Guardian, as well as all other MedCrypt products, are built with the unique needs of the medical devices in mind. And Mike mentioned this specifically of, one of the key things for us is we want to maintain clinical functionality at all costs. What this means then is that we allow the MDM to choose the parameters most appropriate for a specific clinical use case. This is critically important, particularly when you think about something like a surgical robot. The last thing you want to do is have a security feature in the middle of an operation turn off that robot or make something inaccessible. So we want to always maintain that clinical functionality at all costs, and that's why we allow certainly the MDM to choose those parameters going forward. Finally, about Guardian, as well as, again, about all of our products, they work on new as well as existing, as well as embedded devices. Okay. Let's go ahead and shift gears then. We'll talk about the second product. If you could forward, please, Kate. Great. So this is our behavior monitoring product, or a product that we call Canary. And Canary enables post-market monitoring of security events. And it's really designed to ingest event data as well as device metadata, and then send that to our monitoring service. And then Canary will take that data, analyze the data to identify whether it's obvious or more obscure or subtle examples of either malicious or anomalous behavior. And that can be anything from a failed transmission, expired certs, signature failures, unauthorized commands, whitelist violations, a whole host of things, everything all the way down to, hey, there's a door ajar on a particular device, and the ability to detect those types of things. Now, when that anomalous behavior is identified on a device, MedCrypt would get an alert about the device all the way down to its specific serial number. We'd send that alert over to the MDM, and then the MDM, or the medical device manufacturer, will decide how to actually handle that particular situation. This is unique in that it gives the MDM the opportunity for a very proactive response versus waiting for a call from a customer, a healthcare delivery organization, or worse yet, from a regulator. They can actually reach out and say, hey, we're seeing such and such happening. This is what we're doing about it. So that proactive response, as opposed to a reactive, we've got a problem out there. Canary can also determine if a vulnerability is being exploited. So by having the right CVE information, we can scan the behavior data to see if a device has been subject to a vulnerability exploitation, which is a great segue for us to move then into our third product, talking about vulnerabilities, and that's Heimdall. Kate, thank you. So our third product, Heimdall, really focuses on that vulnerability tracking as well as SBOM generation portion that Mike and Dan talked about with the coming together of MedCrypt and MedISAL. So Heimdall essentially allows an MDM to either upload an SBOM or use our SBOM generator tool to create one. It'll query various vulnerability databases looking for CVEs, and it'll monitor SBMs against those databases looking for those known vulnerabilities. Heimdall then clearly will identify vulnerabilities of those affected devices all the way down to the serial number. And the beauty of this, as we look at these products together, is Heimdall can forensically link the vulnerabilities to device events. And what does that mean? That means by reviewing device behavior data that comes off of our behavior monitoring tool, or Canary, an MDM can see if a vulnerability has already been exploited on one of their devices or multiple devices. The other piece of that is, once an MDM knows which vulnerabilities are associated with which software version, they can proactively warn their customers that are running that particular software version. So again, that proactive approach is really where we're trying to go and take our MDM partners along. All right, Kate, if you could please forward one more. So we thought here, let's take a look at a specific use case to show how the products all come together. And hopefully this use case will demonstrate to the folks here on the webinar the impactful pre-market effects of building security features in from the beginning, as well as those post-market fleet management benefits that you get by utilizing these products, or a combination of the products. So let's say you have here two endpoints, a control console as endpoint 1 on the left-hand side, as well as an imaging system as endpoint 2 on the right-hand side. And full acknowledgement, we understand many use cases are much more complex than this. We're trying to keep it relatively simple just for discussion and demonstration purposes today. So basically, by leveraging Guardian in this use case, let's say the control console wants to send a command to the imaging system. So the first thing you'd want to do is ensure that there are unique key pairs on each endpoint. Next, you'd want to sign and encrypt a command that's going to be sent in the application layer in endpoint 1, and then establish a secure communication protocol like TLS. Send that secure information over the wire. That's kind of the blue line on the bottom of this this picture. And the imaging system, or endpoint 2 in this case, will receive it. It'll decrypt the instruction and verify the signature. And if that signature verification process passes, great, the command occurs, all is good. If it fails, the imaging system can fall back into whatever failure mode the MDM has designated. And this gets back to clinical, maintain clinical functionality at all costs. So along with that process, each endpoint then can report this event data into our behavior monitoring system, or Canary, which is represented by kind of the orange bubbles here on the chart. No PHI, no PII gets transmitted here. But basically what happens is the imaging device would say, great, I received an instruction from the control console. It looks like a known control console and the instruction looks correct, therefore everything is good. Or the alternative, I received an instruction from an unknown console with a new IP address. The instruction looks valid, but the signature verification has failed. And it's by looking at these changes in patterns or changes in behavior, be they subtle or be they very overt, where we can determine if a device is either under attack or if some sort of anomalous behavior is actually occurring. In addition, if you layer Heimdall on top of these solutions, again, Heimdall lets us know what software is running on each endpoint and the SBOM for each device. And this allows us to link those specific vulnerabilities to specific devices in the field that were affected by that vulnerability. So as an example, if there's a vulnerability identified on OpenSSL, and you want to know if you are impacted or if your devices are impacted, Heimdall can tell you if your SBOM is running that version of OpenSSL. And if it is, we can tell you what specific devices are running that version. And by using Canary, again, the behavior monitoring tool, you can query Canary for event data for those impacted devices to see if anyone has tried to exploit that vulnerability. Okay. That was kind of our use case. I'll kind of close here by summing up with the three products again: Guardian for cryptography, Canary for behavior monitoring, Heimdall for vulnerability tracking, working very well together on new devices that are under development, but also for those legacy devices where you can't update software, but you can install a new application. And this allows the MDM to leverage these tools by deploying a new application into the devices so that they can get some of the security features without having to actually touch that code. So I'll go ahead and close there, hand it over to Mike, who I think is going to...
Unmuted. Great, thanks, Jeff. Great job on that. So last couple thoughts here before we do some Q&A. Just wanted to put out some predictions for 2021. Not sure that anybody in December of 2019 predicted anything accurately in 2020, right? Who thought that we'd be in a pandemic, and you could not possibly have predicted any of this. But given any sort of further unprecedented world-changing asteroids from outer space, I think it's pretty clear that the COVID has had an impact on healthcare, specifically from a security perspective, that is going to stick around for quite a while. So a couple quick thoughts here. So first, I remember when we were first raising money for MedCrypt from investors, and we said to investors, hey, we help make medical devices secure from hackers. And somebody would say, who would ever hack a medical device? Right? This is a very theoretical problem. Like, yeah, this is a Homeland episode. This is never actually going to happen in real life. Has this ever happened before? No, this isn't really a problem. And it's became very clear during the early days of COVID's impact in Europe and the US that hackers were actually targeting healthcare infrastructure at the time when we needed it most, right? There's been an increased set of ransomware attacks on hospitals. There's been attempts to lock down and steal IP from pharmaceutical companies. So if cybersecurity has become an important topic during a pandemic, it's very clear that this is not a theoretical concern. This is a very real practical concern today and going forward. Second, there had been a trend, obviously, of increasing connectivity across medical devices. Things that you would not think would need to be connected to the internet, like a digital scalpel having a Bluetooth connection that was actually a thing in 2019. But now we see even use cases inside the hospital where devices that are used to treat a patient who could be infectious need to be connected to the hospital network so that a clinician can measure the vitals of that patient remotely without having to come in contact with the patient. So if there are any digitally enabled medical devices that have yet to be connected to the internet in 2020, it's coming in 2021. Something we've been waiting for a while, the FDA pre-market cybersecurity guidance enforcement. We heard from the FDA in the last couple of months that essentially the number 2 priority for 2021 after COVID is finalizing that pre-market guidance, or at least getting the next draft out, which is great. It's going to become very clear once the FDA finalizes this what medical device manufacturers need to do to comply. But the real catalyst for change in the pre-market side of the medical device world is the FDA's enforcement of this guidance. And we've already seen some anecdotes where device vendors, before they submitted their device to the FDA, said, we think we have our security strategy covered. And then they come back to us 6 months later and say, we had a conversation with the FDA, can you help us? So it's clear that the FDA is already beginning to ramp up enforcement of its existing cybersecurity guidance, and that's only going to continue further in 2021. I've always been interested by the sort of the shared responsibility of medical device cybersecurity between manufacturers and hospitals. It's absolutely a shared responsibility. I think everybody agrees upon that. Few people agree exactly what the ratio is, right? Hospitals would say this is 90% the device vendor, we're the last line of defense. Device manufacturers might say, well, we can make the thing, but we can't force our users to use it correctly. So I think that the increasing financial pressures on hospitals in 2021 due to fewer elective procedures being able to be done in 2020 and likely going into 2021, it's going to mean that even if hospitals wanted to invest a ton of money in securing the devices they had already purchased, there are finite resources to do so. So it's going to make it clear that device manufacturers really do need to be shipping devices that are secure by design to minimize the responsibilities of the HDOs, financially at least, going forward. We've seen a tremendous rate of increase in vulnerability discoveries in not just medical devices, but in common software platforms that these medical devices use. Back in 2015, 2016, you'd see one high-profile vulnerability found in a specific medical device vendor's device, and that would become front page news. And now we've sort of moved, it seems, to these announcements where somebody finds a critical vulnerability in the TCP/IP stack used by almost every medical device, and now everybody is affected. And I think we had one of those sorts of disclosures in 2019, and I don't know, 3 or 4 of them in 2020. So there are increasing numbers of white hat security research groups with the best of intentions that are out there looking for these vulnerabilities, and will be continuing to disclose information about them going forward. And then finally, everybody is resource constrained, right? With the exceptions of hedge funds that somehow shorted the COVID impact. With that exception, hospitals are operating largely on negative margins. Device manufacturers have uncertain revenue forecasts going forward. So the question is, how can we do more with less? And I think that the only way to do that is for engineers who are building these devices to somehow get 200% more efficient, which is a lot to ask of your engineers, or to use better tooling. And that's really an area that I'm very, very interested in and focused on. How can we build the best possible tooling so that device manufacturers can build more secure devices that are more secure, and get them to hospitals and decrease the total cost of securing all of this infrastructure? Those are sorts of the main things that I see coming in 2021. Hopefully we won't get hit by an asteroid, and we'll have a functioning government in 2021 and all of those things. So with all of that aside, I'd love to move to some Q&A and see what your thoughts are and what questions you have about the broader topic of medical device cybersecurity, or specifically how MedCrypt and MedISAO are working together to address these problems.
So a reminder on how to do that, feel free to pop your question into the Q&A box on the left, or if you want to raise your hand, I can unmute you so you will be able to ask your question live.
Surely Chris Gates would have had a question, but I believe he left.
He did.
Dan, anything big that I missed or we missed, or you want to close with here?
I don't think so. You hit all the good points. I'm excited to see what 2021 brings. I think that's going to be an inflection year when all these tools and all these smart people putting together suddenly come together, and we see what we can actually do with them. So the community, over the past 5 years, I've just seen a constant improvement in the cybersecurity posture across the industry, and it's slow, but it's there. And I think 2021, I'm really looking forward to that I was looking forward to 2020, but then COVID, hit everything. So I think 2021 is where we get back on that, and we can really see a huge improvement in the industry. Yeah,
totally agree. It's now funny for me to think back to October of 2014 when I first started thinking about this problem in this company, and I was worried that I was too late to the market. And it's pretty clear that this is a slow and steady progression toward security maturity in our space, but we're absolutely at an inflection point now. Great question for Mimi. Are you seeing any international trends that are worth highlighting as well? Maybe I'll take one stab at this and then pass to Seth. I know that Vidya and I have had a couple of conversations with consulting organizations who are working with other international governments, helping those governments determine what should their policies and regulations be around cybersecurity medical devices. And one thing that I shared with these groups is that having 190 different regulations that are all slightly different is going to become an impossible barrier for medical device manufacturers. So to the extent that the existing regulations out there meet the goals of those companies, of those countries, we'd really like to see international regulations line up with what the FDA and others have been saying, which the existing regulations out there between the FDA and Europe and Canada and France and Australia, there's large agreement between those countries. And I think what we're going to see is lots of countries following and saying, hey, this is a priority for us as well. Our national healthcare systems are not going to be buying devices that do not have security considerations by design, and largely following, I think, the FDA in terms of the regulations they put out there. Seth, what do you think?
Yeah, well said. I think that, while I was a domestic regulator and I didn't get paid to pay attention internationally, in fact, we were widely followed, as Mike said. And what I can say is that while there are sort of permutations and nuances, I think doing good security, doing security well, will allow you to check the box in a compliance type fashion. What I will, and you can clearly see that the internationally there is increased interest. You can see that there is a large push, especially on the pre-market side, along many different countries, and I do have I had a slide with a bunch of lists, but Therapeutic Goods Administration out of Australia, even China FDA. You have the European Union, I think, with their MDR regulations, which were postponed until I think next year due to COVID. I think France, Singapore, Japan, Canada all had something to say about cybersecurity. They all recognized the need. I think where regulators struggle is to I haven't seen a regulator yet come out and say, here is the bar, right, from a technical perspective. Here is what is required absolutely to do that, because and sort of for good reason, right? Like, and I know at FDA we're dealing with 6,000 different products. So how do you assess what is adequate security for each one of those products? So we try to split the difference and get a good framework going. In terms of determining what that, do you meet that bar? That's going to be the next frontier. But I think, doing good security will get you very far in terms of a compliance standpoint. The only other nuance I would add is that privacy is sort of a different beast. It's a little bit sort of a Venn diagram to security. I don't understand it well, but I think that's definitely something that manufacturers are going to have to consider strongly when they're looking at international markets that maybe weigh or approach privacy a little bit differently. But I can say that good security will probably be a platform in order to enable you to do some of the things that my presumption of privacy will require you to do.
Unmuted.
Yeah,
The
great
one thing I would
points.
add to that, if that's okay, we have a white paper where we essentially took all those different countries' guidances and tried to map it to the US to try to say, hey, what is the delta here? How could any device manufacturer hit all of these? What's the most common denominator? And to Seth's point, exactly, the most deviation is around that privacy component. So it for the most part, seems like there's solid alignment between the different guidances.
Yeah, great point. Thanks for bringing up that white paper. I have a quick question, Dan, that I'll maybe ask you. I've heard medical device vendors ask this question. I'd like to see your perspective on it. As a device manufacturer, aren't you just giving hackers a recipe of how to hack your device if you put your software bill of materials out there and highlight all the vulnerabilities? Aren't you just making the bad guys work easier?
No, because they already can do that. And some of the open source tooling that I developed, unfortunately, helps in doing that kind of post facto analysis of the software bill of materials. So it's really, it's putting you on the same footing when you know what's going on in your device, what's included, what the vulnerabilities are. You want to know that before some guy buys one of your devices, especially off eBay, and then does some sort of post facto analysis on it and figures out that there are these vulnerabilities in there. So it's, the information isn't something that you necessarily want to yell from the rooftops, but it's something that everyone in the supply chain really needs to know so that they can stay ahead of the attackers that can figure it out anyway with enough energy. And anyone in security knows that if someone says no one's going to do this, it takes too much effort, there's some 16-year-old kid in the middle of some country somewhere who's going to put the effort in just because.
Unmuted.
Yeah, totally agree. There's a really scary story told by a former Medtronic security person who worked in the government previously about this massive attack on their network that had to have come from a nation state, and it turned out to be a 16-year-old kid in Europe who was just poking around and looking for some stuff. It was kind of amazing. Hopefully that 16-year-old kid found gainful employment with those skills. Yeah, and then just to add to your point, Dan, there's absolutely a role for security through obscurity. Obscurity helps, right? I think security through obscurity gets a bad rap sometimes, but it's very difficult to claim obscurity around your SBOM when you give your customer a Dell tower that boots into Windows that was released on Windows 10, where the software was released in 2019, so presumably developed in 2018. You can make a couple guesses as to what software is in that device and get really, really close, right? So there's limited value, in my opinion, to the security by obscurity, specifically around SBOM stuff, because a lot of your SBOM ingredients are probably obvious to a hacker to begin with, and the ones that are not obvious can usually be detected with a little bit of sleuthing. So yeah, the best in your best interest to be candid about what's in your SBOM.
Right. And on Windows, if you know the right commands, you can even ask it, hey, what's the SBOM?
Exactly. Yeah. Great. Well, if there are no other questions, I'd like to thank everybody for joining. We're very excited to be working with MedISAL at MedCrypt and continuing to invest in everything that MedISAL and Dan had been working on previously. If you're an existing MedISAL customer and have questions, or you're thinking about joining MedISAL, please reach out and let us know. We'd love to hear from you. We've got a couple of links on the screen here. You can email any of us. We have a policy around obscurity of our email addresses, so it's almost impossible to determine what our email address is, as you can see. So shoot any one of us an email. We'd love to talk. All right. Thanks, everybody.